doesn't really matter.
Our guest this episode, Joe Bowen, chairman of the Fitchburg Cultural Council, and Alexander Ramos, student trustee to Fitchburg State University, the voice of the students, elected by your fellow students to be the voice on the board of directors for Fitchburg State University. Thank you for joining us. Issue 1, the Boston City Council is considering a proposal to let non-citizen residents vote in local elections. Other cities such as Cambridge and Amherst have also passed bills allowing this, but it has stalled at the State House, which has yet to sign off on these home rule petitions. Should the legislature allow these cities and towns to give non-citizen residents the right to vote in local elections? Cindy?
No, I'm against that. I don't think it's right. You should be a citizen.
Joe?
I stand with Cindy on that, and I have an alternative that might work better.
Alex?
Yes, I do. I think they should have the right in local elections.
Michael?
I'm leaning towards no.
Lean towards no. What's your alternative?
So I think the alternative is to have the non-citizen groups be a bit more organized and vocal and out in the face of the political leaders of the city, town, or whatever, and be able to influence their decision making.
Yeah, that makes sense. And they're getting their voice out there and let the elected officials listen to them.
I just think that we don't want to water down the significance of citizenship, and so that's my hesitation. It's an accomplishment to become a citizen of the United States of America, and with that comes certain rights. And that's the way it's always been. And I generally hate the "that's the way it's always been" argument. I think in this case it fits, though.
Yeah.
Well, how about the non-citizens, permanent residents who are here, have a job, pay taxes, own homes, pay property taxes? Should they not have a voice?
Well, I guess I would question why they wouldn't pursue citizenship.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want a seat at the table in terms of voting for elected officials, well, if you're a legal resident and you are here legally and you have a foundation by which you could, in theory anyway, apply for citizenship, and you'd have a significantly easier path than somebody starting from scratch, then why wouldn't you pursue that? I mean, again, I'm just trying to think to myself, there's a significance to it. But I mean, I would like to hear what somebody like Alex, who said yes. What's your rationale?
Well, again, it is very hard to become a citizen in the United States, and like he says, so a person who comes here legally, they pay taxes, and they're working here for 10 to 5 years. I think they should have the right to have a voice in local government. I mean, when it comes to federal government or state government, I think it should be strictly for citizens, as stated in our Constitution. However, when it comes to local governments, for mayor, for the city council, local governments, their policies they directly affect them. So therefore, I think they should have the right to become citizens. They should have the right to vote for their mayor and for the city council. So they'll have a sense of belonging here. And also, if they have the right to vote, they might also increase their likelihood of becoming a citizen.
Makes sense.
And not only, and the question that I would have for the group also is not just looking at the rights of citizens, but how about the rights of communities of self-determination?
Yes.
So if Amherst says we want to allow non-citizen residents to vote in our local elections, not state, not federal, just local elections that only affect Amherst, Cindy, why do you and Ashburnham think that you should be able to say no to them?
I just think it's a slippery slope. I think once you start doing that, it's going to end up on a state level. And on a state level, I would be absolutely against it. If you could say that it would be strictly based on a town's choice, I might agree to that. I might say fine if the majority of the town. But it's going to end up going. It'll end up going once you do that and you set a precedent. It'll go to a state level, and I just don't agree.
You know, we had Dr. Lively on on the Focus episode, and we didn't get a chance to ask him something like this, but way back in the early '90s, Vermont allowed civil unions. Okay, and back then the predominant was predominantly, well, no, we're against gay marriage, but we'll allow civil unions. Okay, and what Dr. Lively would argue is that, well, that was a slippery slope. Look at that. You let that in, to Cindy's point, you let that in, well, then you have this in and that in. Now, I'm not saying that I'm opposed to gay marriage. What I'm saying is, as an analogy for those who are against the policy, okay, I can see why people would see it as a slippery slope. You start with local, then you go to state, then you go to federal. Where do you stop?
So do we then say, well, local cities and towns shouldn't be able to pass any laws because anything could be a a slippery slope and leave all decisions to the state.
Well, no, you're talking about the rights of citizens.
To vote in local elections, only local elections, not state elections, not voting for
But
US
again, where do you
Senate,
draw
just
the
their
line?
own.
Where do you draw the line from towns and cities to next state level? Do you know what I mean? If you say, okay, this town can do that, this town, next thing you know, you got 20 towns and cities that are all doing it, and now they put it on a ballot and they want to make it a state issue, and now it becomes a state issue, and it's like it shouldn't even get to that point. If you want to be able to vote, become a citizen. There's a path to it, and you can do that.
Joe, why should we be telling Amherst what to do?
Well,
Local elections.
what I find interesting about this discussion is that the community of Amherst came together and said non-citizens should be able to vote. Well, why aren't the citizens who are elected to serve these non-citizens listening to that segment of the population and responding accordingly? Instead of trying to provide them with the ability to vote, why don't they act on their initiatives, which is helping them become more part of the community, so that when they intend or get around to getting the citizenship, then they'll feel more empowered to be an active participant.
Well, again, if they're paying taxes, if they're living here, they're working here. I mean, that's sort of like taxation without having representation in the government. So I think, I mean, it's a human right. Also, I mean, if you look at the island of Puerto Rico, I mean, they're citizens and they cannot vote for president. So it's very similar to that. But again, I do believe that they should have the right to vote, to have a voice in their local government, only in the local government, because then it shows, it's very American in my point of view, because they're coming here to have a better life. You know, they're looking for the American dream. So I think, you know, if you expand the voting rights to strictly, you know, permanent residents that are working and they're paying taxes and they're being responsible, it just shows the notion of what makes America great, in my opinion.
Michael?
A lot of good points. I mean, you know what, and this is why I say leaning or tend to, because you know what, I'm not totally decided on this
then
issue, but
how
I've
do
heard
you
both
decide,
good points on both sides.
Citizen, okay, so you're talking about people who have come here and they're here legally. Then what's to say now illegal immigrants? Because they're in the town.
Is the
they're
slippery
working.
slope the only thing you're hanging your hat on this?
Well,
Instead of
yes, I am.
instead of
because I
addressing
think
the-
it can
the-
expand
the
from
issue.
there. It can
It's the
expand from there. And so who determines what's a citizen? Anybody who lives in your town, so you could be a legal immigrant and you're going to
A
vote?
legal resident.
A legal resident.
Legal resident.
Well, a lot of illegal immigrants are
not
legally
legal residents.
but they're legally living in that town,
Yeah,
and they could
the
argue.
visa.
You're the one who's always telling me
They're
there's legal and
undocumented.
illegal.
Remember,
legal resident.
everybody's now saying, no, there's no such thing as illegal. They're undocumented. So what's to stop an undocumented?
So nothing other than
Resident.
slippery slope would tell you in Ashburnham to tell the people of Amherst what to
Yep.
do. Issue 2, conservatives around the country led by Donald Trump are complaining, I would say whining, that social media companies are censoring conservative content. Is social media discriminating against conservatives, and what should be the role of social media companies as it pertains to what some consider to be hate speech or fake news? Joe Bowen.
I think it's hard to determine whether or not that's actively happening, but I do believe that the social media companies need to figure out a way to combat the perception of that, if it is a perception, if that can be quantified. We'll continue further.
Alex.
I believe there is a sense of discrimination, but not totally. But yes, there is some sort of discrimination.
Michael.
If it weren't for social media, Donald Trump would have never become president. So I don't see how you can argue discrimination. You could say likewise that if it weren't for the internet and alternate news sources, maybe Barack Obama wouldn't have become president. But I can tell you with almost certainty, if it weren't for Facebook and social media, Donald Trump wouldn't have become president. So I can't see I think it's more of a sort of a persecution complex than anything else.
Cindy.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't seen the proof of it. It does seem that, I mean, obviously the media is leaning left these days. I have no doubt about that. I don't know about social media. I think if it's found to be that way, it's absolutely wrong. It's, you know, First Amendment rights. People just leave it alone. Both sides, everybody get your say, and stop trying to control what's out there.
Do you believe that the social media companies are trying to control what's out there
I'm
right
not
now?
sure. I'm not positive of it. I suspect that they are. I do. But I haven't seen the proof of it, so I
Because,
can't say.
You know, it's funny because right after I sent out the outline for this show and what the topic was going to be, there was an incident where someone in our group posted something that there was an event to have a counter protest in Springfield against David Hogg, and the event was removed.
Yes.
The event
yes.
was deleted.
Exactly.
So the person went on and said, "Oh, this is social media. They're censoring conservative content. I guess they didn't like the counter protest, but the regular protest is still up." And I know my friend Cindy came right on and said, "This is another example of social media censoring
I did
conservatives."
think that.
And
thought
it turns out that the event organizer herself canceled the
it,
event.
yes,
'Cause it
I
has
agree.
nothing to do with Facebook.
I agree.
So
I
is some of it the hysteria that Michael's talking about?
Could be. I mean, there could be.
Persecution complex. That's.
It's funny. I notice in the group that and we have about 3,000 people in the group, and I'd say it's probably split maybe 50-50, maybe a little bit lately towards the conservatives and the liberals.
Oh, geez, I don't know about that.
But all of the conservatives say that it's a liberal group, and all the liberals say it's a conservative group, and
Yeah,
everyone
that's
feels
so
everyone's
true.
against them.
Yes.
It
That is
seems
so true.
It seems that any post that speaks against their own personal narrative is taken as blown up. Whereas when they look at something that agrees with
Yeah.
them, that should that's taken for granted, should be the norm.
I know, and I don't understand that. Why would you want to be personally on a site that everybody's in agreement? Like, what good is that? What are you going to learn from each other by doing that? I like when somebody poses something different than I agree with, and I've actually changed my mind on certain things from other people in the group. You know.
So how about, and the second part of that is, there's a lot of fake news out there on both sides,
Yeah.
from the alt news sites. I mean, and that's posted as real news.
Right.
Does social media, do the companies have a responsibility to filter out stories that are shown to be fake? I mean, how do you do that? How do you consider what's truth, what's not?
Well, it's very hard to show what's truth or what's not, because I mean there's their politics and their ideology. There's a very biased towards that, and I believe social media should be unbiased. And I think the responsibility should be on the people to see, to see what they,
Exactly.
listen
I
to
agree.
and what they hear to see what's fake news or not. And also the Trump administration, they also, I read 2 days ago that they filed a lawsuit against, Facebook and Twitter for being, very liberal and for deleting comments from conservative, congressmen. So I mean, it's very interesting.
It's hard because the vast majority of these so-called fake news sites on both sides, left and right, the way that this fake news article gets shaped is there's a tiny little kernel of truth inside there, and then they extrapolate it or interpret it or twist it to fit a larger agenda. There you have a fake news story. I've seen it time after time. It's a pattern. So how can you really ban something that maybe has that tiny kernel of truth in it? How do you separate the fact from the fiction? What I think people just really ought to do is, for the love of whatever, just read the darn thing. Look at every word. I mean, how many times in the internet group, I can, a couple of real culprits that do it every single time.
Fact-check
They
things,
post something and say, look at this shows this. Well, no, actually, did you see this word and that word and this sentence and that sentence? Actually kind of says the opposite of what you said. And by the way, this is from a third-party source. And this is, so what you have to do is, unfortunately, we have to just, there's really no way to censor it. There's really no way to ban it. There's really no way to control it. But we just need to develop better reading comprehension skills, quite honestly.
So we are this group, Flap TV. We boost our show on Facebook, which means we basically advertise it to expand our reach to audiences, let them know we're out here. Now, recently, Facebook changed their policies, and what I had to do is I had to send them a copy of my license, identity verification, then they had to mail me something. Then it was a pretty big rigmarole to prove that I am who I am. In order to boost posts on the show. Question: should social media companies be looking at having some sort of identity verification for users to try to weed out the fake accounts, the trolls, and make sure that you're a real person? Or is that?
So it was my understanding that when social media came to be, it was a free and open forum for anyone and everybody to voice their opinions, their projects, to tell about what's going on in their lives and all of that. And then now it seems like the public is trying to make these social media companies become like news agencies and verifying sources. And I don't think that will completely change the dynamic of this. I work in information technology for my regular job, and I was really interested in, well, how does a company like Facebook filter this type of content out? And what I learned was they have thousands of people all over the world that they're people that screen this stuff. They read it, they determine whether or not it violates terms and conditions. And these are people, some are in the US, a lot of them are not. They come from different cultures, they have different perspectives on things, and they try to relate it against the same language in the terms and conditions, and they make mistakes in a lot of cases. And to try to think that we could do some sort of machine learning to establish protocols that will be able to effectively screen that out, I think is crazy. I think we're years away from being able to see that from a technology perspective. Got a really good example, if you'll give me a chance to share.
Go right ahead.
There is some screening that goes on with Facebook where they look for violence and things like that, and they put up a disclaimer. You know, click here. If you click here, you're accepting that you might see something that's not good or violence or whatever. There was a video that I had on one of the sites that I'm a member of. I clicked it because I was curious what it was. It was a 5-year-old boy blowing out his birthday cake, and all his friends and family or whatever just like covered him in the cake, and that was deemed as violent according to Facebook. So this is where you can see algorithms and things can make mistakes too.
They can. That's always been up. You know, I go back and forth, and I'm the admin of Fitchburg-Leominster All Politics, and sometimes I'll see someone post a story that's just obviously fake from a fake site, which is completely not true. So the question is, do I delete it knowing that it's completely fake, or do I leave it up and let it take its course and let people, let people hash it out? I err on the side of just let it out there.
Yeah.
And let people. You're the admin for
Discussing
the
Fitchburg
largest
now.
Facebook
Yeah.
group in the area, which is DFN. How do you handle issues of censorship?
Well, one of the great things about that group is that it almost self-censors. Because there are 17,000 members, there's people from all different areas that will call out things and call them fake news. And it's when it starts to descend into really nastiness, that's when I would step in to control that content. But other than that, it usually corrects itself over time.
Yeah, I
Alex,
agree.
you're
I agree.
in a generation, you're in college where there's
Yes.
a big concern in schools in your generation is cyberbullying. When it comes to getting away from the fake news, but looking at bullying, looking at personal attacks, looking at hate speech, is that a different area? Should social media companies be more aggressive in controlling that, or again, do you use the internet at your own risk?
Well, in the year 2018, people come to social media to look for the news, to look for everything. So I mean, people should have the right to, write whatever they want, whether if it's hateful, because it's free speech. And social media is a platform for free speech for the First Amendment, because hate speech under the First Amendment is protected. So I believe, if cyberbullying, I do believe there should be, I guess some sort of restriction, when it comes to school policies, but if it's private page, but if it's public and if it's in a public, forum, I believe, it should be, protected, and they should write whatever they want, whether if it's hateful or not. Because the First Amendment of free speech is what makes America great, in my opinion.
It is, but when we talk about, we're in a social media discussion page, and you have personal attacks flying, and if Michael writes something that you find that you disagree with, and you're one of those people going to respond back by calling him names, insulting his family, well, then people like Michael are not going to be posting for afraid of the personal attack. So sometimes doesn't not censoring suppress free speech because you're holding other people down? Yes,
in a way, but free speech. You should write whatever you want, because in a sense, if social media is a public forum, they should write whatever they want, whether if it is hateful or not. I do believe it should be protected. So unfortunately, I think their responsibility should come down to the people of what they write.
And honestly, you see on the page, if you do say something hateful to somebody else on the page, you're going to get clobbered.
Exactly.
They're not going to just let you say whatever you want and start insulting people and saying racist things or all that. You get corrected on the page pretty quickly, and that's the way it should be. Society, ruling itself.
We're taping the show on August 31st. The primary is September 4th, just 5 days away. We have some races on the ballot. Let's go through them and make our predictions. Who's going to win and why? Register of Deeds, Alex.
I believe it will be the incumbent, Kathy Reynolds, because I mean she's a lawyer and she's the 12-year incumbent, so it'd be very hard to beat her. So it's up to David and to Patty to be able to run a great campaign to win the election.
Michael.
The party insiders tend to dominate the primaries. That's traditionally how it's worked anyway. So whereas Kathy Reynolds Daigneault is the incumbent and she has the support of a lot of the major Democrats in the area, I would tend to lean towards her. I think the others are putting on a good fight though, so it'll be interesting.
Cindy.
I actually predicted David. He has a pretty big following. And a lot of people like him, and I think some people are ready for a change. And he presented himself with some really good ideas about efficiency on how he's going to run the Registry of Deeds, and the fact that he would be there all day. That's been an issue for some people. You know, he'll earn the pay, and I think he's actually going to pull this off.
Joe.
I think Kathy has a good edge. There is controversy that surrounds her, and I'm not sure how much of the public is aware of that. But if there's a sizable number, I think that Patty Buckley would probably come in with the edge there. She's got a pretty large following. She's got a great online presence. She's been very vocal and specific about problems that she has with the current Registry of Deeds, and has been vocal about what she would do to make change.
Yeah, she's been very vocal the past week, so
Yes.
yeah, she's
And
out
if you
there.
drive on South Street, you see her signs everywhere.
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah.
people, groups, holding up her signs, and you can see it from a mile away.
So do David and Patty split the anti-incumbent vote, or do Patty and Kathy split the women's vote, giving Dave an advantage? Which one do you think would be more prevalent? Anyone?
I think I don't know about the woman vote. I don't know about too many people in this area that do that. It's, Hillary wished they'd do that, but I don't think too many
Always
women
Hillary,
are doing that.
no matter what it is.
Well,
It's what
she
you're gonna bring up,
went
Hillary.
after the woman vote. I don't think that works. I don't think that's the case.
You
But
got
I
to go
do
by
think that,
conventional wisdom in the primaries. You
Yeah.
would think that the latter, the anti-incumbent sentiment,
Yeah.
gets split. It's unfortunately,
yeah, I think so.
Do people remember, it was only weeks after the election that WBZ came out here and exposed that scandal where the incumbent Kathy Reynolds Daigneault just is a no-show at a $90,000 a year job. They followed her around for 10 days. She hardly showed up at all at the office. They confronted her, interviewed her, and then they came back a few months later to follow her around again, and she didn't change her habits at all. So that was a pretty big hit, but it was 6 years ago. It's a 6-year term. Do people remember that, and is that going to have an impact in this race?
I believe so, and I think that's why Kathy's going to win, because she has the edge in any event to win. I mean, also she is a lawyer, so I mean, other lawyers like other lawyers to have that position. So I think she's going to win the election. Before I was leaning towards David, but after seeing the signs and seeing and going into the race and doing my research, I think Kathy's going to win.
Democratic primary for 3rd District congressional seat, Michael.
For the same reason, same justification on Register of Deeds, I would have to give the edge to Rufus Gifford just because party faithful, a lot of big names in the party seem to be endorsing him, but would not be surprised at all if Dan Coe were to pull it off. He's run a very energetic, very strong campaign, very impressive campaign. I would be close to shocked if anybody else other than Gifford or Coe pulled it off.
Cindy.
I'm right with Michael on that, exactly. I give a slight edge to
Did you get that on
Rufus.
tape?
Yes, yeah. Slight edge to Rufus just because of the parties that are backing him. But Dan Coe is like, he's running right now.
He has one hell of a ground game.
Yeah, and he's
Talk about the
going. So
energy.
I'm like Michael. I think they'll be the top two that you got to look for.
Joe Bowen.
Yeah, I also agree with Michael. However, I do think that Dan has the edge over Rufus simply because of his energy and his ground game.
And the money.
The money. He's got a sizable amount of money that he's pulled within the district, as well as outside the district. And what candidate gives out their cell phone number? It's like, if you want to talk to this guy, you just give him a call. And it's that's quite the edge, I think.
Alex?
I agree with Michael. I think it's going to be Rufus. He has the edge, but again, I mean, Danko, I mean, with all the money he has in his campaign, and he might have an edge, you know, in that sense. But however, I think it's going to come down, especially in Fitchburg, the strength and weaknesses of what you said on Facebook, the strength and weaknesses of the political factions. You know, we have, you know, Sam Squally who endorsed Danko, and Mayor Natali who endorsed, you know, Mr. Gifford. So therefore, I think, you know, the followers, you know, depending how strong the factions are, I think depending on how that's going to be, the winner is going to pull out the vote in Fitchburg.
Excellent
Yeah.
point. There's about, I think there's like 37 or 38 cities and towns in the district.
Yeah.
Just looking at Fitchburg, when people go out to the vote in Fitchburg, are they voting for Danko versus Rufus Gifford, or are they voting for Sam Squally versus Steve DiNatale?
Well, I think come Wednesday we're gonna have a very active feed.
Is this a
Because of
surrogate
that.
race, or are people going out to vote for the congressional candidates, or are people going out to vote for the local
Little of
faction?
both.
Exactly, yeah.
Little of both.
What do you
It could
think?
be a little of both. Yeah.
What do you think?
I think both factors are at play. It's just it's going to be like Cindy said. It's going to be really interesting Wednesday. It's going to be fun.
I think it's a lot in play. I mean,
Especially-
I see these fire-breathing Republicans who are on the DiNatale bandwagon actually switching their party registration so they can vote for Rufus Gifford, who under any other circumstance they would absolutely despise because they hate Sam. And on the other hand, I see some Republicans who are part of the Sam organization pushing for Danko, who they have no use for either, other than this election. So it's.
And then you also have the people that really haven't been paying attention, and they'll just go with whoever their politician is that they like.
Are people who are not paying attention going to go out and vote in a primary on the day after Labor Day?
Well, I think if you get them out there, yeah, I mean, I think people will go out there and
I think it's
vote.
going to be a very low voter turnout.
Yeah, we'll see.
Here's a question.
Oh,
I'm going to put this to Joe. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. I was just going to follow up, but just it might be important to separate, you know, the Sam and the Steve DiNatale from the conversation and just go with endorsements. You know, candidates win a lot of times because of the endorsements that they receive, and you know, so it's not necessarily is it Sam against Steve DiNatale.
Yeah.
It's more or less who's got the stronger endorsement.
Yeah, because it is bigger than just Fitchburg.
Yeah.
But
And Rufus has been here in Fitchburg campaigning since November, I believe. So I mean, he was the first candidate to open office in Fitchburg. So I think he's well known in Fitchburg. So I think he will pull out the win.
In
city.
Fitchburg?
Yes.
So Rufus wins Fitchburg?
Yes.
Who wins Fitchburg, Joe?
Danko.
Danko
Yeah.
wins Fitchburg. If Danko comes out victorious on September 4th, on September 5th, does the establishment in Fitchburg then line up behind Danko? Do they go with Rick Green, or do they stay silent?
That's a good question.
they go to Rick Green.
I would
You think that?
I would
You
probably
think
say
Steve
Rick
DiNatale
Green.
goes to the Republican? Goes to Rick Green?
I think so.
I think so.
You think so? They're not gonna rally around the Democratic nominee?
I think anyone who wants to wear a party mantle is going to quietly and without much effort vote for whoever the nominee or support whoever the nominee is. But they're not going to go out of their way if that's the case.
Republican primary for governor. Whose turn is it? Michael.
Well, it was fun having him on, but it's going to be Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
It was fun having Scott Lively on, but it's going to be Charlie Baker.
Baker.
Yeah. Baker, the most popular governor in the country. Baker.
Most popular governor in the country in a general election. Do you think Scott Lively is going to pull a bigger vote than people are expecting?
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
I think he might.
What's the percentage? What percentage does Scott Lively pull in a Republican primary?
I would say, I'm going to say 35-65.
35% he
The same.
gets?
The same.
35?
35, 55. Yeah. that
Somewhere in the
sounds
30s,
similar,
yeah.
Somewhere in the 30s? I'll go in the 40s. I'm going to take the high on that.
Ooh,
I'm going to
you
go
are,
in the
all right.
40s.
Okay.
Very quickly, Republican primary for U.S. Senate, Jeff Deal or Beth Lindstrom?
Lindstrom.
Jeff Deal.
Deal.
Deal, definitely.
Sorry.
It's okay. Alex Ramos, Joe Bowen, thank you for joining us. We'll find out in 5 days if these predictions come true. That's it for Flap TV.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.